Commander Vextar stood at the massive window of his warship, looking down at the small blue planet spinning slowly below. Earth looked so peaceful from up here, like a tiny marble floating in the darkness of space. The alien commander's arms were folded behind his back as he studied his target. His black eyes, which had seen the destruction of 17 different worlds, showed no emotion. The ship around him was enormous, stretching for miles in every direction. Its metal walls hummed with power, and strange alien writing glowed along the corridors. Thousands of Dominion soldiers moved through the ship, preparing their weapons and checking their armor. They had done this many times before, and they expected this to be just as easy as all the others. Vextar's intelligence officer approached him, carrying a glowing tablet filled with information about the humans below. The data was clear and simple. These Earth creatures had only basic weapons that shot metal bullets, and their most powerful bombs used old nuclear technology. Compared to the Dominion's plasma cannons and energy shields, the humans might as well have been throwing rocks. "Commander," the intelligence officer said in their clicking alien language, "our scans show no significant defenses, no energy barriers around their planet, no advanced weapon systems, no space stations with real firepower. This should take less than 6 hours." Vextar nodded slowly. He had expected as much. The Dominion had been watching Earth for months, studying human behavior through their communication signals. What they saw was a divided species that spent most of its time fighting among themselves, perfect targets for conquest. Far below on Earth's surface, in a military base hidden deep within the mountains of Korea, Captain Lee Min-ho was having a very different conversation. The 32-year-old officer stood in front of a wall of screens showing radar data from around the globe. Red dots were appearing everywhere, moving down through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars. Lee Min-ho had been expecting this day for 5 years, ever since the first strange signals had been detected from deep space. While most of Earth's governments argued about what those signals meant, a small group of military officers had been preparing for the worst. They knew that if aliens existed and could travel between stars, they probably weren't coming to Earth to make friends. The captain's hands moved quickly across his control panel, activating communication systems that connected to every military base, every ship, and every defense station on the planet. His voice was calm and steady, even though his heart was beating fast with fear and excitement. "This is Captain Lee broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. Unknown hostile forces are entering our atmosphere. All defensive units prepare for immediate combat operations. This is not a drill." Around the base, alarms began to sound. Soldiers ran to their positions, pilots sprinted toward their fighter jets, and ships in the nearby harbor started their engines. Lee Min-ho knew they were completely outmatched, but that didn't matter. This was their home, and they would defend it with everything they had. His destroyer, the Taeguk, was docked at the spaceport just outside the base. It wasn't the biggest ship in Earth's small space fleet, but it was fast, and its crew knew how to fight. 37 men and women had volunteered for this mission, knowing they probably wouldn't survive. But they also knew that someone had to make the first stand. As Lee Min-ho walked toward his ship, he thought about his family back in Seoul. His wife Ji-hee was probably watching the news right now, seeing the reports of strange objects in the sky. His 7-year-old daughter So-young would be asking her mother why Daddy had to go to work during such a scary time. He wished he could call them, but there wasn't time. The crew of the Taeguk was already at their stations when the captain arrived. They had trained for this moment for years, running the same drills over and over, until they could operate their ship perfectly, even in the worst conditions. Now they would find out if all that training was enough. "All systems ready, Captain," reported his first officer, Lieutenant Park Dong-hyuk. "Weapons are charged, engines are at full power, and communication links with other ships are established." Lee Min-ho took his place in the captain's chair and looked at the main screen. The alien ships were huge, much bigger than anything humans had ever built, but size wasn't everything in a fight. Sometimes the smaller fighter could win by being faster, smarter, or simply more determined to survive. "Take us out," he ordered quietly. "And remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves today. We're fighting for everyone who can't fight back." Vextar watched in complete shock as his most powerful weapon fired directly at the small human ship. The plasma cannon blast should have turned the Taeguk into floating pieces of metal and dust. This weapon had destroyed battleships 3 times larger than the human vessel, but something impossible happened instead. A shimmering blue energy field appeared around the human ship just as the plasma hit it. The deadly energy that should have meant instant death simply bounced off like water hitting a rock. Vextar's 4 eyes widened in disbelief. His intelligence reports had said nothing about humans having this kind of technology. "How is this possible?" he muttered in his clicking alien language, staring at his weapon control officer. Our scans showed no advanced defensive systems on their ships, but before he could figure out what was happening, the human ship fired back. A bright beam of energy shot from the Taeguk's main gun and hit Vextar's flagship directly. The alien commander felt his own ship shake violently as the human weapon somehow cut right through his advanced shields like they weren't even there. Inside the Taeguk, Lieutenant Park Yuna was working frantically at her weapons console. Her hands moved across the controls so fast they were almost a blur. Sweat dripped down her face as she pushed their ship's systems harder than they were ever meant to be pushed. "Power levels at 120%, she called out to Captain Lee Minho. "I'm pulling energy from everything I can find. Life support, artificial gravity, even the coffee maker." The 28-year-old weapons officer had studied alien technology for 3 years, ever since the first signals were detected. While other people were trying to figure out if aliens were friendly, Park Yuna was figuring out how to kill them. She had developed new ways to modify their weapons, creating energy beams that could punch through almost any kind of shield. "Good work, Yuna," the captain replied. "Keep hitting them with everything we've got." Communications Officer Kim Taemin was monitoring radio signals from all over Earth. His job was to coordinate with other ships and keep track of what was happening in the battle. What he saw on his screens made his heart beat faster with excitement and fear at the same time. "Captain, I'm reading multiple new contacts on approach," he reported, his voice staying calm even though inside he was amazed. "It's not just our military ships. I'm seeing civilian vessels, cargo haulers, even some fishing boats that have been armed with missiles." Captain Lee Minho looked at his tactical display and couldn't believe what he was seeing. Ships were coming from every direction, not running away from the fight, but rushing toward it. The cruise ship Hala had mounted rocket launchers on its deck. The cargo vessel Busan Express was carrying a makeshift railgun. Even small fishing boats were speeding toward the battle with whatever weapons they could find. Commander Vextar watched his tactical display with growing confusion and something he had never felt before in 17 conquered worlds. Fear. The human reinforcements weren't arriving in any organized military formation. They came in waves of pure chaos, each ship fighting with a wild determination that made no logical sense. "Sir," his tactical officer reported nervously, "the human vessels are not following any recognizable battle patterns. They're attacking in ways that should get them killed, but somehow they're surviving and causing significant damage to our forces." What Vextar was seeing went against everything he knew about warfare. When most species faced a superior enemy, they either surrendered quickly or retreated to fight another day. But these humans were doing something completely different. They were getting more aggressive as the battle got more desperate. The destroyer Baekdu, commanded by Captain Choi Minsu, was badly damaged and losing power. Any reasonable commander would have retreated to save his crew. Instead, Captain Choi did something that made Vextar's blood run cold. He aimed his dying ship directly at the alien cruiser and pushed his engines to maximum power. "This is Captain Choi to all human vessels," came the voice over the radio. "The Baekdu is making our final run. Tell my wife I love her. Tell my children. Their father died protecting them." The human destroyer smashed into the alien cruiser at full speed, its hull cracking like an egg as it penetrated the enemy's shields. The explosion that followed lit up space like a second sun, completely destroying both ships. But the blast also created a gap in the alien formation that allowed a transport ship full of civilian refugees to escape safely. Vextar stared at the expanding cloud of debris where both ships had been just moments before. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. The human captain had deliberately sacrificed himself and his entire crew just to save strangers on another ship. "Commander," his intelligence officer said quietly, "I think our information about these humans was very wrong." The metal chair was cold against Commander Choi Gina's back as she sat in the alien interrogation room. Her flight suit was ripped in 3 places from the crash landing, and dried blood covered a cut on her forehead. But despite being captured and surrounded by enemies, she sat up straight with her shoulders back, staring directly at the alien commander across from her. Vextar had interrogated hundreds of prisoners from 17 different worlds. He knew exactly how this conversation was supposed to go. First, the prisoner would beg for their life. Then they would offer to give him information about their military in exchange for mercy. Finally, they would break down completely and tell him everything he wanted to know about their species' weaknesses. The interrogation room was designed to be intimidating. The walls were black metal with no windows, and strange alien symbols glowed red along the ceiling. The only light came from a harsh white beam shining down on the human woman. Most prisoners were shaking with fear by now, but Commander Choi, Gina looked completely calm. "I have studied your language," Vextar said in perfect Korean, each word pronounced exactly right. "I know all about your culture and your history. I know about your wars, your governments, and your military capabilities. Your world will burn, and there is nothing you can do to stop it." He expected her to start crying or begging. That's what always happened. But instead, something incredible occurred that had never happened to him before in decades of conquest. "Choi," Gina smiled. It wasn't a happy smile or a friendly smile. It was the kind of cold, determined smile that a person gets when they know something their enemy doesn't. The kind of smile that appears on someone's face right before they prove everyone wrong. Vextar felt something strange happen in his chest, something he had never experienced before. For the first time in his long military career, he felt afraid. "You think you know about us," Choi Gina said quietly, her voice steady and confident, "but you don't understand anything. You've read our history like it was a technical manual, but you missed the most important part." She leaned forward in her chair, her dark brown eyes locking directly onto Vextar's 4 alien eyes. There was something burning behind her gaze, an intensity that made the alien commander want to step backward, even though he was supposed to be in control of this situation. "We've been preparing for this fight our entire existence," she continued. "Every single war we've ever fought, every battle we've ever lost, every impossible situation we've ever survived has been training for this moment. You think you're facing a primitive species, but you're actually fighting something much more dangerous." Vextar tried to maintain his confident posture, but something about the human woman's words was making him uncomfortable. "Your weapons are inferior. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your ships are small and weak compared to our fleet." "That's exactly what I'm talking about," Choi Gina replied with that same cold smile. "You're thinking like every other alien species you've conquered. You're looking at our tools and our machines, but you're completely missing the point." She stood up from her chair slowly, even though heavy metal restraints were still locked around her wrists. The chains didn't seem to bother her at all. "Do you know what makes humans different from every other species in the galaxy?" she asked. "We don't fight to win. We fight because the alternative is unthinkable. We've been doing this for thousands of years, not against aliens like you, but against each other." Vextar's intelligence reports had mentioned human wars, but he had assumed they were simple territorial disputes, like most species had. "Your internal conflicts prove you are divided and weak." "No," Choi Gina said, shaking her head. "Our wars have made us stronger. We've learned how to fight when we're outnumbered. We've learned how to win when we have inferior weapons. We've learned how to keep going when any reasonable person would give up." She began walking around the small room, the chains around her wrists clinking softly with each step. Somehow, even as a prisoner, she seemed to be in control of the conversation. "Letty, let me tell you about Korean history," she said. "My ancestors fought off invasions from China, from Japan, from Mongolia. Each time we were outnumbered and outgunned. Each time everyone expected us to lose quickly. But we never did. We fought in the mountains, in the forests, in the cities. We fought when we had no food, no ammunition, no hope of victory." Vextar was listening despite himself. Something about her tone was making him pay attention in a way he hadn't expected. "And that's just Korea," Choijina continued. "Every single culture on Earth has the same kinds of stories. Humans who fought impossible battles and somehow survived. People who refused to surrender even when surrender was the logical choice." She stopped walking and turned to face him directly. "You picked a fight with a species that doesn't know how to quit. We've been fighting each other for millennia, learning every dirty trick, every desperate strategy, every way to turn weakness into strength. You're just another enemy, and we've been getting ready for you our whole lives." Captain Han Jiho gripped the railing of his ship's bridge as he watched something incredible happening outside his windows. The new Soul had been a simple cargo hauler just 2 days ago, carrying rice and electronics between Earth and the Moon. Now it was bristling with homemade weapons and flying toward the biggest battle in human history. "Captain, look at that," whispered his engineer, pointing toward a massive mining ship approaching from the asteroid belt. The vessel was 3 times larger than anything in Earth's military fleet, and someone had welded enormous railguns along its sides. "That's the Iron Mountain. They mine asteroids for a living, but they've turned themselves into a battleship." Han Jiho nodded in amazement. All around them, civilian ships were arriving from every corner of the solar system. The passenger liner, Golden Phoenix, which normally carried tourists to Mars, now had missile launchers sticking out of its windows. A fleet of small personal spacecraft, the kind rich people used for weekend trips to the Moon, flew in formation like a swarm of angry wasps. "Sir, we're getting a communication from the Planetary Defense Network," reported Navigator Lim Subin, a young woman who had been working cargo routes until yesterday. "They want to link our ship's computer to the main battle system." "Do it," Han Jiho ordered immediately. "Connect us to everyone." What happened next was something that had never been seen before in the history of space warfare. Every ship, every weapon, every person fighting the aliens suddenly became part of one giant coordinated system. The cargo hauler New Soul was talking to fighter jets in Earth's atmosphere. Mining ships near Jupiter were sharing targeting data with submarines in Earth's oceans. Even individual soldiers on the ground were connected to spacecraft millions of miles away. Navigator Lim Subin watched her screens fill with information from all over the solar system. "Captain, this is incredible. There are over 10,000 ships joining the fight, and most of them aren't even military. I'm seeing fishing boats with torpedo launchers, construction ships with plasma cutters, even a wedding party that turned their cruise ship into a mobile missile platform." Back on Earth's surface, something equally amazing was happening. The alien invasion had awakened something deep in the human spirit, something that turned ordinary people into an unstoppable force. Grandmother Oh Kyungja was 78 years old and should have been hiding in a bomb shelter with the other elderly people. Instead, she sat in her small apartment in Seoul, surrounded by 5 different computers and 7 communication devices. Her fingers moved quickly across keyboards as she coordinated supply runs for the entire neighborhood. "Attention all delivery. Drivers," she spoke into her headset with the authority of a general commanding an army. "We need medical supplies to Building 47, ammunition to the rooftop battery on Gangnam Street, and food to the families hiding in the subway tunnels. Move quickly, but stay safe." The old woman had spent her entire life organizing her community, from school fundraisers to local elections. Now she was using those same skills to keep thousands of people alive during an alien invasion. Her network of friends, neighbors, and family members had become a resistance cell that could move supplies faster than the military. 3 blocks away, 16-year-old Bae Hanul was doing something that would have been impossible just days before. He was helping to reload ammunition for an anti-aircraft gun that had been set up on his school's roof. The heavy shells were almost too big for him to carry, but he worked alongside adults who treated him like an equal. "Hanul, we need more." "Shells from the storage room," called out Master Sergeant Kim, a professional soldier who had quickly learned to appreciate the teenager's quick thinking and strong back. "On it," Hanul replied, already running toward the building. His 13-year-old sister Soyoung sat nearby with a laptop, monitoring alien ship movements and relaying the information to gun crews all over the city. The 2 siblings had become an important part of Seoul's defense network, proving that the fight against the aliens wasn't just for adults. Commander Vextar stood on his flagship's bridge, staring at tactical displays that showed his invasion falling apart in ways he had never imagined possible. His fleet of warships, which had conquered 17 worlds without serious resistance, was being torn apart by an enemy that shouldn't have been able to fight back at all. "Status report," he demanded from his tactical officer, though he was afraid to hear the answer. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than we can count them," the officer replied nervously. "The humans aren't fighting like any species we've encountered before. They're not trying to win individual battles. They're fighting as if their entire planet is one giant military unit." Vextar watched his screens show thousands of human vessels working together with perfect coordination. A mining ship would provide cover fire, while a passenger liner launched missiles. Then a swarm of small fighters would attack from a completely different direction. It was like fighting an enemy with 1,000,000 arms, all controlled by one incredibly smart brain. "And sir," his intelligence officer added quietly, "we're detecting something else. The humans aren't just fighting with their military. Every single person on their planet seems to be part of this resistance. Children are helping to coordinate attacks. Elderly people are running supply lines, and civilian ships are fighting just as hard as their warships." For the first time in his long military career, Commander Vexitar realized he might be facing an enemy he couldn't defeat. The humans had done something his species had never seen before. They had turned their entire civilization into a weapon. Commander Vextar sat alone in his private quarters aboard his damaged flagship, staring at a communication screen that would soon deliver the most humiliating report of his military career. Around him, the ship creaked and groaned as emergency repair crews tried to fix the massive holes that human weapons had torn through the hull. The lights flickered constantly, and he could hear the sound of escaping air being sealed by automated systems. His 4 hands trembled slightly as he began typing his report to Dominion High Command. In over 200 years of military service, he had never experienced anything like what had just happened at Earth. His invasion force, which had started with over 3,000 ships, was now down to fewer than 600 badly damaged vessels limping away from the human solar system. Personal log, Commander Vextar, Dominion serial number 7749 Alpha. He began speaking into the recorder, his voice shaky and tired. "I am officially reporting the complete failure of Operation Earth Strike. Casualties are at 80%. Fleet effectiveness is near zero. We are retreating to safe distance for emergency repairs and strategic reassessment." He paused, struggling to find words that could explain what had happened. How could he tell his superiors that a species they had classified as primitive had just handed the mighty Dominion its first major defeat in over 1,000 years? "The intelligence reports were completely wrong," he continued. "These humans are not the divided, weak species we expected. They are something far more dangerous than we ever imagined. I recommend immediate reclassification from conquest target to extinction-level threat." Back on Earth, the atmosphere was completely different. In the rebuilt command center deep beneath the mountains of Korea, Admiral Song Min-seok stood before a wall of screens showing the retreating alien fleet. The 60-year-old naval officer had spent the last 3 days without sleep, coordinating humanity's desperate defense. Now, as he watched the enemy ships disappear beyond Pluto, he felt something he hadn't expected. Not relief, but determination. "Sir, long-range sensors confirm the alien fleet is leaving our solar system," reported Captain Park Hyunwoo from the communications station. "They're moving away at maximum speed and don't appear to be regrouping for another attack." Standing next to the Admiral was Commander Choi Jina, who had been released in a prisoner exchange just hours before the aliens retreated. She was still wearing the torn flight suit from her capture, but her eyes were bright with excitement as she studied a tablet full of alien technology specifications. "Look at this," she said to Admiral Song, holding up the device. "Our engineers have been working around the clock to understand their weapons and shields. We've already figured out how their plasma cannons work, and we're starting to understand their faster-than-light engines." Admiral Song nodded approvingly. "How long before we can build our own versions?" 6 months for basic plasma weapons," Choi Jina replied. Maybe 2 years for their propulsion technology. The really interesting part is that their tech isn't that much more advanced than ours. They just developed in different directions. We were so focused on efficiency and safety, while they prioritized raw power. The Admiral walked over to the main tactical display, which showed the current position of every human ship in the solar system. Even after the battle, thousands of vessels remained on patrol, from military cruisers to converted civilian ships that had proven surprisingly effective in combat. "They'll be back," Choi Jina said quietly, following his gaze to the display. This was probably just their first scouting force. When they report back to their home worlds, they'll send a much larger invasion fleet. Admiral Song turned to look at her, and his weathered face showed the same unbreakable determination that had carried humanity through the impossible battle. "Let them come," he said firmly. "We know we're not alone in the universe now, and we're very interested in meeting our neighbors properly next time." Throughout Earth cities, the celebration was just beginning. People poured into the streets, not just to celebrate their victory, but to honor the thousands who had died defending their world. In Seoul, Grandmother Oh Kyung-ja was still at her computers, now coordinating relief efforts instead of military supplies. Teenager Bae Hanul and his sister So-young helped distribute food to families whose homes had been damaged in the fighting, but even as they celebrated, everyone understood that this was just the beginning. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible by defeating a major alien invasion. There would be consequences. Commander Vextar finished his report with words that would change how the Dominion viewed Earth forever. Recommendation: avoid all future contact with human species. They possess a psychological trait we have never encountered before. When faced with impossible odds, instead of surrendering or fleeing, they become more dangerous. They treat desperation as motivation and transform weakness into strength. He paused, thinking about Commander Choi Jina's cold smile in the interrogation room, about the human ships that had deliberately rammed his vessels, about an entire species that had refused to acknowledge defeat, even when facing annihilation. "These humans have weaponized their own refusal to quit," he concluded. "They are not just another species to be conquered. They are an existential threat to any civilization that underestimates them. Some wars should never be started." This was one of them. As his damaged fleet disappeared into the darkness between stars, Vextar knew that the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had awakened, and they were no longer alone.